Hello, one and all, to our podcast, The Server Knights. Here with me is my dad, Rebel Knight, and my brother, Saint Lieb. Since we were talking about horror stuff last time, I think that the best thing we can do now is talk about horror and horror movies. So I'm going to pass it off to my dad, just as usual. Go ahead.
Thank you, son. So we're into October. So we are now into the Halloween season. As far as we're concerned, it probably started about mid-September, but we held off until October. So now we're fully into October. So the topic we are going to be talking about today is horror movies. Now,
Horror!
We, as a family, love horror movies. All of them, any of them. We'll give it a try. Although
I grew up on it, you know. It was very okay. So I remember when I was little, I would watch tons of horror movies, whether it was at home or with friends, and there were very few that would over time make me actually scared. In particular, Ju-on the Grudge. I think it was the third one. That one, it was kind of the beginning era of jump scares being introduced into.
Well, with those ones also, because they were actually Japanese movies originally.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've watched so many horror movies. I'm so much older than you guys, but with American horror films, there's a happy ending because they want you to walk out of the film like everything's complete, everything's done, it's all closed off, it's finished, moving on.
Yeah.
But with Japanese movies, they didn't do that. They left it open-ended, so that when you walk out of that theater, you feel like there is something amiss. There's something wrong. It's not complete. Like the ghost is still following you, kind of thing.
Yeah. And no big resolution.
Yeah, no resolution. So it's really kind of it's a deep down, fearful feeling when you get done watching those movies.
Yeah.
And so, The Ring and The Grudge, as Americans have called them, these two movies were very big on that. They did not leave them open. As a matter of fact, in not The Ring, but in The Grudge, the little kid ghosts win. Basically, even in the American one, they win. There's no end. They're still there, and it's frightening to know that those ghosts are still there, and people could still be living there.
Yeah, I like how they kind of portray them as different things. The kid, I think, turns into the cat, if I remember correctly. And
I think so. It's been a while since we've watched that one.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. I know they came out with one not too long ago, The Grudge. And it was pretty good, but it wasn't my favorite. I felt like it relied too... It relied too honed in on, American horror movie style, where... how do I explain it? It's more cinematic, more than it is about the horror itself.
Yeah.
And, I think it tried to delve too much into Hollywood style, and I don't know. I prefer the very Japanese style when it comes to horror movies and shows in general.
Okay, so and this brings me back to another point, which was in American cinema, we go through different levels of this kind of horror that we like, and when I was growing up in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was this whole area where it was about blood. Everything was gore.
The
How
gore
much
area.
blood can they... If you go back and you watch ones like The Nightmare on Elm Street, which came out in 1984, it was the first one, completely frightening. There was blood everywhere. It was about how gross can you really get with the special effects.
Okay, there's something really odd that I'd like to mention before we continue is I have not watched Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and I think there was another big main one that I just did not watch. But
Hold on,
I didn't get to those two.
Wait 1 second. I need to remove you from my will. So that is unacceptable. You need to be watching these movies. You don't know where you are until you've seen where you've been.
I've seen just about every other horror movie. I just haven't seen those ones.
I've seen the ones within your time frame, within your life.
No.
But
I've seen quite a good amount that were not within my generation. You know.
Have you seen Evil Dead 2?
I did watch, I think the first one.
The very first one from 1987?
I believe so. Yes.
Now, there was Evil Dead 1, which was okay. As horrors go, there was some scary parts. But Evil Dead 2 brought in humor. There was a part where he cuts off his own hand, and the hand runs around the rest of the movie trying to kill him. His own hand. And he fights with it, and he calls it dirty names, and he's just laughing hysterically because he's psychotic at this point. Evil Dead 3, which was the Army of Darkness. Terrible movie. I would recommend never watching that. You will enjoy the first two. Even the remake was pretty good of Evil Dead, which came out a few years ago. But Evil Dead 2, on its own, is a standalone great movie because there's demons that possess his girlfriend, and he has to lock her in the basement, and she keeps talking and laughing at him and saying horrible things to him throughout the movie. She just pops her head because the basement door is chained, but she keeps popping it up and saying horrible, evil things to him, and he just keeps telling her to shut up and fuck off and all this stuff. It's so funny. Just in general, one of the best horror movies, because there is a little bit of laughter, but there's so much that really disturbed me about that movie.
I kind of wanted to go back to the gore topic because I think that whole era spawned off some very specific movies, like the Saw franchise, which is based on gore. I remember watching all the way through 1 and 2 with my now longtime ex from like a long time ago, and I would watch it with all my friends as well. And I think the only one that truly got me would have to be the third one, because at the time it terrified me because of the trap in specific was like this head trap that was like also a bear trap, and when it went off, it would rip open the top of the head where the jaw is.
Reverse part and bear trap, yeah. Yeah,
like a reverse bear trap, and it scared the shit out of me and gave me nightmares for like a week or so.
I was gonna say, I remember you as a child, and you would wake up screaming, and then it was Saw, and I was like, really, Saw? Because I watched the first one; it was psychologically damaging more than it was gory and bloody and everything. But just the idea that he was basically just messing with these people was amazing. After that, it really turned to gore. How gross can we truly get? How much blood can we add into a movie? And for me, I can live with the blood and the gore. Of course, I did the Sacramento Horror Film Festival for 5 years. The first 5 years it was out. I saw some pretty gruesome stuff. So for me, gore isn't a big deal. That doesn't bother me. But the stuff that psychologically messes you up, that's the stuff I kind of want to watch because it's uncontrolled. You can't control what's happening. You can't control what's going to happen. And it's to me,
there's a couple different movies. There's a couple different movies that are just like, holy shit! Like I can hardly watch this. But sometimes it takes a while to get into those ones. Yeah, of course. There was one in particular. I think it was called Into the Tall Grass or something like that. That one.
Yeah. It was on Netflix, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
That one. When I watched it, I was like, holy shit's going down. Because I thought at first, like, damn, this is a cool concept. It's creepy, but it's unnerving, but it's not like scary. And then it started getting weird, and I was like, what is going on? What is happening here? And then there was something to do with this whole meteorite thing and like some sort of like time travel effect, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And it gets super out of hand, and then just at the end, it's just one person makes it out, but they're kind of connected to the meteorite, so they're kind of pulling other people in, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting concept. That's very. It's almost thriller, but it's still supernatural. So it's like hitting that like. It's hitting the very very horror aesthetic feel. So I don't know. Okay, so in particular, when it comes to my favorite type of horror in general, it would have to be anything supernatural. I love seeing crazy monster designs and like different like aliens and zombies and stuff, because there's tons of different versions of them. But I think my least favorite would have to be thriller types. I don't like it when they drag it out like really long and make it so there's like chase scenes like left and right, you know, and the jump scares, because either they're really not hitting right, like they're kind of boring if it's just straight jump scares every 2 seconds, and it's too much if it's all chase scenes, you know.
Yeah. There's times when you're watching some of these horror films and it's like you know something's coming and you want it to get to that, but it's building so slow that you can almost feel that it's been too long. Like you start to lose the fear. It takes you out of the movie because it's dragging on too much.
Yeah, albeit sometimes if it's done right, it can work really, really well. But if it's not done right, it drags on too much. And I agree, it's kind of a drag just to listen to these people yelling and screaming over nothing, you know, fake jump scares.
Well, and that's the thing is that certain movies have that effect. They just do. They have that long drawn out. But then when they get to the scenes are really good.
Yeah.
So they almost want you to forget that they were dragging that out and probably dragging it out for time.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you gotta like really kind of pay attention to what else is going on. I wish they wouldn't drag them out like that. Now, in the last, I'd say, decade and a half, the only ones that really have kept my attention have been the first two Conjurings.
Ah.
And that is because when I was doing my paranormal research stuff, I got to meet Ed and Lorraine. And they were very nice people. And they were telling stories. And I really enjoyed that time in my life. But also, it was one of those times when I realized I just don't get scared at movies anymore. But when they came out with those, Lorraine was still around for the first movie. Ed had already passed. The Conjurings were both really good movies, the first two. The third one, I know it was an original story that Lorraine had, but it was one of those stories that's better when it's told. To view, it gets a little drawn out, and maybe, I don't know. And the thing about it is that even the original stories were kind of played with a little bit, and they weren't they're not exact to the original stories, but the first two Conjurings did really well with making it a very scary story.
Yeah.
The one that always sat uncomfortably with me from Ed and Lorraine was the one about Annabelle, and the movie was terrible because the movie itself, they tried to make the doll scary looking. You know what was even scarier? It was a Raggedy Ann doll. That was frightening.
Those are fun.
Yeah, I used to have your grandmother bought Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls, or not dolls, but the bed sheets for us. So I remember those as kind of a playful time in my young childhood.
Yeah.
And then to see that was what the original Raggedy Ann, the real Annabelle was that doll. Oh my gosh, it freaked me out. It was too much psychologically. That was damaging for me. And just the clip in the first movie, the small clip of Annabelle and what she did, that's frightening. That was just frightening. The movies were not so good.
I think they tried way too hard on the design for that doll to make it look scary, but they didn't focus hard enough on making it actually scary. And I think that's something they miss most times when they do like ghost movies and stuff. The whole point is to have this creative freedom to do as you please, sure, because you don't actually usually see these entities. Most times it's a sound in the background, it's something slightly off over to the side that you hardly could notice, and it's about finding these things that don't specifically point it out so you can find it yourself, and that's what makes it scary. And so many Hollywood producers don't get this. And it's something in Japan that they've kind of almost mastered, even with like The Grudge and stuff. They hide that character in the background half the time, which is really interesting. There is
there was one that came out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, there is one movie in particular as of late that they have kind of started doing that with in Hollywood. Pretty much, it would have to be It, you know, Pennywise the Clown and whatnot. There's so many.
I read those books when I was in high school, and I remember reading them in my room alone, and it scared me.
Oh yeah,
and all the way up to the very end.
Yeah.
And when you read the books and at the very end, it turns out to be a giant fucking space spider. I was kind of like disappointed. It was like the movie The Fog in the 80s. There was a movie called The Fog that came out, and this fog rolls into town, and everywhere the fog goes, people die. And it's really creepy until you find out they're a bunch of ghost pirates. Now, that was disappointing to me. They could have made it where the fog was killing people, Or there was another one called The Mist. Have you boys watched that?
No.
Nope.
Oh my gosh, The Mist. This father and his son go to this grocery store, and this mist rolls in. Inside the mist are these aliens from another dimension, and they are killing people. They're like giant bugs and monsters and spider-like creatures, and it is frightening. At the very end, and I won't give it away, but it sits with you long after the movie is over. It's so just heartbreaking and disturbing. The ending is psychologically damaging more than anything. Just it really hurt to watch the ending. Exactly. It's total emotional damage. I was messed up.
I kind of want to bring it back to the Pennywise thing, because.
Oh, sorry. So what I meant to say is that okay? So the movies, they were scared. No, I'm talking about the remake version, not the television version.
Mhm.
You guys knew there was a television version, right?
Very lightly.
I don't remember when that came out, but I do.
The thing I wanted to bring up with the movies in particular was like they hid Pennywise multiple times throughout the movie, just in different little spaces before he kind of even showed up, and I think that was like something that was really cool about the It movies, and I don't know, because like there's a scene where they're like talking at the school or something, and then the graffiti next to them, you can see him like looking over as one of the graffiti tags.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really interesting. And even in the background, a couple times he shows up, if I remember correctly, because I don't fully remember. It's been a while, but he shows up, and you can just see him there, and there won't be anything talked about how he's just there. You know, like they don't mention it. He doesn't jump scare them. Nothing. He's just there, watching, and that's really creepy.
Yeah.
So
I really enjoyed that.
in that same aspect, there was a movie that came out not too long ago here. Actually, a couple of them, called Ouija Board.
Oh yeah.
And then there was I think it was Source or something like that, the original ones. Those are the same thing. If you watch carefully, now you're watching somebody in the closer focus, but if you watch the characters in the background, like their faces stretch out with their mouths wide open.
Oh yeah.
Your mom missed it when we were watching it because she was so focused on what they were doing. There was somebody reaching into this hole in the back, in the basement against the wall, and if you watch the little kid in the background, her face opens, her mouth opens, and the jaw just keeps dropping. It is disturbing. It is very disturbing.
Those ones are very cool when they have like the focused camera where it's like you see the character high detail up front, you know, but there's something going on in the blurry background. Oh, that stuff that hits good. I think it depends though, because it's got to be like a scene, you know, and it's got to be quick. Because if it's too slow, it's like, you know, it is kind of spooky, but it doesn't hit as well. If it was just a flash on screen for like a second and then not be there the next. Just to make you think you didn't see it, you know.
It's when it's in the background and it's blurred, and then you refocus it and she's fine. That's the kind of stuff that I'm kind of like, oh, did I just see that? Did I just see what I think I saw?
Yeah, those are cool.
That's because again, it sits with you a little bit. Like, you know, I don't think I needed to see all that.
Yeah.
But see, that was the thing about Ouija board, was that it does a bunch of that.
Yeah.
The little kids in the background, the mom in the background, the guys in the background, just all that background that motion.
Yeah.
If you're not paying attention, you're going to miss some of the scariest stuff in the film.
Oh, something I wanted to bring up about some of these movies and why they're not higher rated, because these scares are really good, but the reason why they don't hit as well is because the acting is terrible sometimes, and it's just hard to watch because they're like, I'm a teenager. I'm not going to listen to you, Mom and Dad. I'm going to go down by this haunted house next to the bridge where like 20 people died, and I'm going to video record it, and nothing wrong is going to happen. And it's like, you don't need to cram all this information in one place. Let us figure it out over time. But they don't always get that, and it makes it hard for these really good designers for the FX to really stand out, because the acting is done horribly. And I feel like not enough directors.
See, now, it just depends, because if you look at some of the older films, like Evil Dead 2, the acting was terrible. Bruce Campbell is an amazing guy. He's done some really great shows, and he can act. His acting is not the greatest, but in that film, he was supposed to be over the top, and so he was, and it was amazing. And it kind of added to the film because his acting was bad.
Yeah.
But then I think back to movies like The Shining from 1980.
Oh,
now, The Shining, psychologically, that one was it. That was all about ghosts and how they affected that guy's brain.
That one is a
Some of you guys have
masterpiece
seen
at work. I remember watching it. That it was something about how like his what's it called? Not psychology, psychological state deteriorates over time, and the ghosts tend to like take possession of him because of it. And I think
they're using his frustration against him.
I think that was a really good example of how like slowly building on a character can work. It's like a proof of concept. It really works if you do it right. Not many people get it, but they did. And I think the different aspects of like spirits in between, messing with the kid like down the hall with the twins, and they flash that scene of just them brutally murdered, and then it goes right back.
And the other part of that is that it's not CGI.
Yeah,
they just used actual actors. Like the scene where she runs up the stairs. And this, you have to understand, with The Shining, it holds a very special place in my heart because when I was a kid, I was real little. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. Your grandfather and your grandmother decided that they wanted to take us to a movie, so we were going to go see another Disney movie, and they decided in line they didn't want to watch another Disney movie. We were going to go see a horror film, and your uncle and I were in the back seat of this car at the drive-ins. So we were hiding in the back, and they just kept telling us, "Why don't you guys just lay down and take a nap? We're going to watch this movie." And it didn't matter. I kept looking over the top. I was watching it with them, and it scared the piss out of me because the next month was spent trying to sneak into my parents' bed because I was so scared. And at first, your grandparents were okay with it. After a while, they go, "This is enough. You have to stay in your room." And I'm like, "I'm not staying in there. Jack Nicholson's going to kill me." And that was the whole thing. I thought Jack Nicholson was going to kill me. And I thought he was going to burst through the door and stab me or something. I was scared to death of Jack Nicholson because he was just that frightening. So as an adult, I went back and watched it. And it's an amazing movie, and he does an incredible job. He looks crazy. He looks psychotic. He looked like he just snapped. And it was
it's probably the haircut.
Well, the haircut, the crazy in his eyes. I just remember the smile on his face. Yeah. You know, when he leans through and he goes, "Here's Johnny."
It was a perfect mix of thriller mixed with like actual horror, and I really loved that about The Shining. It's got to be one of my top fives for
acting in general. Oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on her name now. The actress that was with him in that movie.
Yeah.
It was her face too, because he would burst through that door, put the axe through the door, and the look of terror on her face was beyond words, because she was scared. She was truly scared.
I actually have some insider info about that movie too. There was the scene where he's chopping down the door. They got him a fake door and not a fake door, but a fake axe that wouldn't do as well. And he had experience as a firefighter, so he was just chopping through it really quick. They had to replace the door and give him a fake axe, I think, if I remember correctly, because it was a real axe before. And they had to reshoot it along with it. So when you see him chopping through the door, there's a little bit of a continuity error with how the door is, because he chops through it too quick, so they had to replace it. I thought that was really interesting.
And that scene where he actually says, "Here's Johnny," was an ad-lib. That was not in the script. He was just into his part as this psychotic guy trying to scare the hell out of her. And I'll be honest, I was scared with her too. To the point where there was a scene where she runs up the stairs and she looks to the right, and there's a guy in a dog suit and another guy in a tuxedo, and they're laying on the bed, and then they sit up and look at her, and you know it's the ghosts. You know it. I'm 8 years old. I'm an 8-year-old scared to death, and I know those are the ghosts. It scared me. Like, and I know you shouldn't be scared of a guy in a little dog suit. Why would that be scary? Because of the scene. The scene, she was running from the ghost. She was running from her husband.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
That whole movie was, and I give all the credit to Stanley Kubrick, who was the director, and he was just amazing with getting everybody motivated for it. But he had good actors. The story was good, and then even the remake, the second part to this, which only came out a few years ago.
There's a second.
What was the name of that movie? The second one. Hold on, your mom's over here. What was the name of that movie with the second part of The Shining?
Oh gosh, it was so good, but I don't remember the name. I don't remember.
But even that was actually pretty good. It was like a good second part to that movie.
It would be like The Shimmering or something like that.
No, it wasn't that. Now you're gonna make me look it up.
Doctor Sleep, I think it was.
What's it called?
I think I looked it up. It says Doctor Sleep.
Yes, Doctor Sleep. Oh my gosh.
Really?
And it was just so good. If you haven't seen that, boys, I highly recommend it, because if you watched the first one, you loved it. This one was really interesting. It's about that little boy as an adult.
Really?
And
I didn't even know there was a second one.
it was interesting. I wouldn't say it was a great horror film, but it was definitely an interesting, like, closure to that movie. So definitely go watch Doctor Sleep. I wanted to kind of move on to some of these other movies that always kind of sat with me a little weird, like the Blair Witch Project from 1999.
Oh, that one was really well done.
That one I wasn't too scared of compared to some other ones.
Well, okay.
The thing about it was that it was a super low budget film, which means that they couldn't afford like fake blood and all this stuff, and they were just doing this in the woods, and it's all from first person perspective. Whoever has the camera.
And that was kind of the
actually
newer thing
seen
around that
Witch.
time as well. It was one of the first ones that kind of did that, where they had the camera perspective. I really love that perspective when it's put in the movies, because most times it's taken up by the people who can do it right. And they definitely did it right on a very cheap budget. I think the thing that really made their movie so big was that they did not show anything to do with the monster almost at all, except for sounds. It was a sound-based monster. And I really love when these horror movie makers, they take up this idea of doing something completely different. And they were one of the only ones that I know of that actually didn't show a monster at all. So it kept that feeling of dread of what it might actually look like, what it might be. But they had this thing controlling them, and I thought that was really cool.
Well, and I kind of wanted to see the Blair Witch. I wanted to see it do it, but it was better that it didn't.
Yeah.
Because it made me want more through the rest of the movie. I just wanted more. Whether I got it or not made no difference.
Yeah.
The fact that I wanted it.
Yeah, I think that what makes it really pop out is that it never fully explains it. It gives bits and pieces, sure, but it doesn't explain how it looks, how it acts per se. It does obviously do certain things, like tell you like what it does per se, like when it turns you into the corner and then does whatever it does to the opposite person or something like that. But they never show the character and they never fully explain it, and I think that's really cool. When they never explain how a monster works, it gives this dreadful feeling of the unknown, because you don't know what's going to happen. And it's very few and far between with who can make these types of characters, but when they are done right, they're done right, you know?
Oh yeah. When they can do it, it makes it so that you walk out with a feeling.
Yeah.
You know? That's what you want. You want it to have given you something back.
Yeah.
Paranormal Activity was another one of those.
Dude,
I'm talking about the first one, not all the ones that they did afterwards, the millions of other ones afterwards.
Yeah.
But the Paranormal Activity, and because I used to do ghost hunting, and we have seen little movements and little things of that nature, that one was more of an extreme. But the fact that it could get extreme like that.
I personally believe that the Paranormal Activity movies, 1 through maybe 3, were really good. Anything after that was pretty much garbage. Not my thing.
Yes.
But because they did something with like witches and like portals to another universe or something like that, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, you've kind of lost the concept. But the first three were really well done because it's from a camera perspective, like a security cam perspective, and it's got this general movement of like certain cameras that you can see, and that's it. And it's like it's something about only having a limited perspective to work with that makes it so when you have like this spirit or something that's like tormenting these people, it really comes through and like shines above most others.
So that is a thing, I believe, where if you know something, then you have more control over it, or you feel like you have more control over it. And I think that's what happened with the Paranormal Activities movies, where they tried to put like words towards it, and through that we were less scared of it, you know?
Yeah, they tried too hard to make it like this whole big story with like all this different stuff, but it lost the concept of the unknown.
Well, that
was what it had going for it.
Yeah.
Well, and the fact that it could just be a general anybody's house kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
When they made it that it was, it's about this cult and it's about this demon that follows his family and it's about the family.
Yeah.
Okay, well now you're taking it away from it could be anybody's home.
Yeah, it did like this thing where it was like, here's the exact name of this demon and the certain sigils you need to remember to do this. And it's like, well, that's kind of how it works, but not exactly, and it didn't fit right. They made it this weird thing where like it shows up full physical form, you can see it, you know, and it's hovering above them, it's taking control and it's shaking the whole house, you know, and creating these dark waves, and it's like that's not how that works, and it's not scary anymore because it's weird now. Like you made it weird.
Yeah, don't make this horror movie weird. Come on.
Yeah. It's cool concept wise, and it worked for the first 3 movies, but after that they overloaded it with too much story, and it lost the concept of it being anybody's house where anything can happen to anyone.
Well, it's like most movie companies and producers, and they look at the money. They think because it's labeled Paranormal Activity, everybody's going to spend their money on it, which is not exactly true. So, excuse me.
I think that what makes a good horror movie for me personally is that the unpredictability and uncontrollable nature of some of this stuff, like the unknown, you know. Yeah. I think though, when I look back on it, it wasn't one of the best movies, like horror movies. I'd say that The Cabin in the Woods was a very scary horror movie for me.
That one was very cool. So I actually thought that one was more cool than scary. Weirdly enough.
That's you, Tucker. That's you, Tucker.
100%. Oh, yeah. I remember they got this whole system where it's like, we gotta put them in this cabin so that we could sacrifice them, so that we don't make the apocalypse happen. I was like, oh shit, that's a really cool concept. But then I think what's weird is they got too happy-go-lucky with it and tried to do different ways to kill them for this thing to happen, and that's where they lost the ability for it to be what's it called? How do you describe this? It's where the whole plot comes in because
you mean the part where you're talking about when they go back to the people in the room that's watching this whole thing go on, and they're placing bets and they're making jokes and
they became too prissy with it. And
it got funny. That was the part that I liked best about it, was that it added a little bit of humor. It's like,
well, yeah. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
People did too.
I think that's
there's a little bit of humor in with all of this horror.
I think that part actually scared me more than anything, because it was the indifference from those people that kind of scared me. You know?
Yeah. That psychological indifference towards how they treated humans in order to get this done. Because they've done it. I think it's explained, but I think they did this a bunch of different times. Which is why they're so indifferent to it, you know. But like the fact that it's actually happening, that they don't care because they just need to get it done, but it's something they need to do, so they find a way to ignore it and find a way to try to have fun with it, and that's where the indifference comes from. And I think that's a great plot point for the movie, but realistically, I feel like I feel like people would go about it in a very, very different way. It takes a little bit of realism out of it for me when they do that, because like those are people's lives. Anybody who's controlling the lives of somebody else and ultimately kills them is gonna feel some sort of regret or anguish. The dread.
I would hope they would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're sane per se. If they're psychotic or sociopathic,
I actually recently found a. I didn't read the book, but I found a summary on it. It's called Blood Meridian, and it goes about people that are exactly like this. They have like literally. It is all about the indifference of humanity and like a bunch of like horrible. A bunch of horrible stuff that just happens to these people, and it's insane. But it's something that's like more scary than any gore or like any jump scare to me, because that is like that's something that can happen. That's something that
a psychological realistic horror.
Yeah.
Those ones are personally, I don't like the aspect of most psychological horrors. The thriller aspect in particular mixes too well with that. And I think it's because we all know it exists, and we all know it's something that actually most likely does happen a lot more often than we all know. But it's like...
Or want to know?
Yeah, or want to know, especially want to know. And there's some really dark stuff that happens in like movies that really does happen IRL. Like serial killers. The Hannibal Lecter movie. How it's based on...
Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. How he pretty much skins and kills people while they're still alive and stuff, and makes his furniture out of like their skin and faces and whatnot. And
that was actually
that's happened.
That was based on a real person who did that.
Yeah. Which is why it's so scary.
And see, and those are when it's based in a real world thing, that makes it a little creepier for me, I think. But I mean, the ones that really stuck with me also were ones like anything that has to do with like demons and possession and the devil.
I love supernatural stuff.
And that all comes from, your grandmother was a Catholic, your grandfather was a Pentecostal, so there's a whole lot of Christianity going on in my past, and so you see things like The Omen, where it's a child who is the devil's son, and he's killing people, and it's brutal. He's not physically going out and just stabbing people, but he's making things happen. He has a dog that follows him around. That's a demon dog. Or now, and this goes to when I was 17. I was dating this girl, and it was Halloween. I stayed with her and her family, and they said, well, we're going to bed, and my girlfriend says, let's stay up and watch The Exorcist. I'm all, oh, cool, I've never seen that. Okay, when I went home, my bedroom didn't have curtains, so I had just thrown a white sheet over, so it made it like this blue color in my room. And I had a 4-post bed, big posts, like the one in The Exorcist. Oh. And it freaked me out, because I was sitting there in this bed all alone, second floor. My room is blue. I can't see the closet. It's pitch black. But I have blue light coming in from the moon. I hated that room. I hated it because it reminded me so much of The Exorcist. I was freaked out.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still feel uncomfortable even watching that old film.
Yeah.
And so I know they have a new one coming out with 2 girls. Really? And they brought back the mom from the original one.
The Exorcist Believer. Yeah,
Yes.
So when it comes to the movie The Exorcist, I was late to the party on that one. I did watch it, but I was really late to it. And when I did watch it, it didn't live up to the expectations that I personally believed it would have had. I don't know if it was the acting or if it was the way the makeup was done, but something just didn't hit as right as it should have for me with it. Because I love the supernatural stuff. It's just phenomenal.
Hold on a second. Let me revise my well again here. You're killing me. You're killing me. That movie is unbelievably frightening.
The story was really good. Do not get me wrong. I really enjoyed the story for it, and the way it played out was very interesting. It didn't scare me though, is what it was. And maybe it's just because I was more used to other horror movies at the time, and I had just probably watched too many horror things in general. Because I watch a lot of true crime and just just general stuff, and it's all pretty terrifying. But The Exorcist, it didn't scare me so much as it was interesting.
Wow. That's one movie I can't sit and watch that one even to this day. And your mom knows this too. I'll want to watch it. I'll be in the mood usually around Halloween, and we'll probably end up watching it at some point this month. But it's also one of those things where it bothers me. It bothers me because there was a made-for-TV movie, and I have never figured out what movie it is, and it talks about this little kid he said, I was walking home, and this other little boy tackled me and beat me up and said he was coming for me, and then later on the kid gets possessed. This was around the time that I was very formative age. I'm 10, maybe 11 years old, and it freaked me out. I was watching in the middle of the day, and I was scared.
Yeah.
And, of course, your grandfather was like, oh, you'll be okay. This is just movies. This doesn't really happen, blah, 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 blah. And then you find out that the real Exorcist was based on a little boy, and that it was real, and that they couldn't figure out what was going on with him. And I think he moved and went on. The exorcism worked, and he went on to live his life as normal. Now, the Exorcist movies, of course, they went on and did like a 2 or 3, I think.
Yeah.
They might even did a 4th, but they were all horrible, terrible, terrible, terrible movies. The first one was good, and I'm curious about this new one, The Believers. It looks good. I'm hoping it's going to be good. Yeah. So fingers crossed on that one. But I think we've run out of time.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, real quick, if anything interests you, of course, you can always go out to your movie apps and see if there's one of those or that you can check it out. But I would spend the rest of the month catching up on movies, watching ones that you haven't seen for a while, or maybe even catch a new horror movie that's out there, because there are a lot of options nowadays.
Yeah.
So
there are a lot of interesting horror stuff that I haven't watched yet. But I guess for now that will be the end of our talk. If you want to find it on YouTube or Spotify, either way. You can also find us on Tumblr, Reddit, Twitter, the usual stuff. I guess that'll be it. Okay.
all right.
See you guys then. Bye then.
See ya.
Bye.